first speaker is Steve Bardin. He is owner of Pro Lake Management LLC and co-owner of the Black Bass Stewardship Council. Group. Okay. Group. And owns that with Gary Klein, a professional angler. And Steve has been fabulous for helping get this going and bringing in a lot of the people that some of us scientists and managers we don't hang around in that same group. And so Steve's been a real treat to work with. Come on up.
So as Dave said, I come from the private sector, and as I look across this room, I see maybe 3 or 4 of us in here that are purely from the private sector, and we do have a different perspective. We have a perspective because the science, the data collection, the fish themselves are a commodity for sale to our customers. And one of the challenges I have with building 2 different businesses that really focus in the private sector is how do people actually experience my work? And that's what we're going to talk about today. So first I want to tell you about both of my companies a little bit and how people experience the work in those, because I know a lot of you in this room, but I don't know everybody. About 15 years ago, I was in grad school, and my mentor at the time, Harold Arms, who I was working for, passed away from pancreatic cancer. And Harold had a pond stocking company. And he was old school in the fact that no matter who called, the answer to the question was typically stock more fish. You know, you call, you have a brand new pond, let's stock fish. Maybe he did an electrofishing survey here and there, but the result was always finding some reason to stock more fish. And Bob can tell me great stories about Harold Arms and stock more fish. If you have vegetation, the answer was stock more fish. What I realized was what we were missing was that what do you do between stocking fish? And that's where the private industry is today. Because of people like Bob Lusk, because of people like myself, Troy Goldsby, Greg Grimes, traveling the country and talking about the science of growing those fish and what management actually is. So at Texas Pro Lake Management, I started the company as just a solo entrepreneur, just me managing lakes 15 years ago. And I still have some of those clients today. They've been with me for 15 years. And the idea was that I want to do the science. I want to sell the science to those people. And the process always starts the same way. They call you on the phone, they send you an email, they've got a problem. You start talking through that, and the questions are things like, who are the anglers going to be? Do you have kids? Do you have grandkids? Who's actually going to be using it? What goal do you want to accomplish? And then you put together a plan. And our plan at Texas Pro Lake always involves us doing the work, repetitively coming out, checking the water quality, harvesting fish, doing the work. But then I think about how are they experiencing that pond management or lake management. And we manage lakes from 1/8 of an acre up to 2,500 surface acres. We manage all types of systems with all types of goals, but 90% of those people, they want trophy bass. And how do they experience that? Well, on the surface level, they either catch fish or they don't catch fish, right? And they say, I want trophy bass, and we try to define it, pin them down on what a trophy bass is, and a lot of people double-digit fish. So how do they experience it? Do they catch double-digit fish, yes or no? But my perspective is you take that a step further, and you involve them in the science every single day. So whenever we're out on the property, we're collecting pictures, we're writing small blurbs, we're sending them text messages saying, look, we're seeing this at this point, higher relative weight, we found a new fish species, we're seeing growth. We're not talking about the end goal of that 10-pound fish. We're involving them in every section. A common practice we use in the private industry is we put the client on the electrofishing boat. We put them in that data collection mode, and they get to see the process, and then they take ownership. Although we're doing the work, they're taking ownership of growing those fish. So the end goal moves from I want trophy fish to I want the experience of growing that fish. And that's how you take a client and carry them for 15 years. I can grow a 10-pound bass in 3 to 5 years, depending on the system and their resources. How do I keep them as a client for 10 years? I involve them in the experience. The other company I own is Black Bass Stewardship Group, and this one is completely different. Just after I started Texas Pro Lake Management, I was asked by Cabela's to come do a pond management seminar out of Cabela's. And no one showed up except for my wife, Casey. Of course, she came with me. Casey's always been by my side, traveling to these things, doing these things, hearing me complain about anglers. She deserves a huge round of applause right now. Yep. Last night I was going through the PowerPoint and she's like, just don't talk about sales too much. And she's the one that really tailored this to make it actually applicable to this audience, I promise you. But I was at that Cabela's and Gary Klein was there, a professional angler who I watched as a kid. And he was there because Berkeley wanted him to talk about catching fish in their lures. And guess what? Nobody showed up for him either. So it turned out that me, Gary, and Casey, and one of the Cabela's reps were the only people there for this entire day. So we got to talk and experience each other, and turns out we had a lot in common. And over the last 15 years, we've become best of friends. We've traveled the country together. I fished reservoirs or water bodies from New York to South Dakota to Florida, Texas with Gary Klein. Spent hours. I've traveled with Gary almost as much as I've traveled with my wife. Stayed at some of the worst hotels you wouldn't believe. Anglers actually think that a good hotel has a place to park the boat and a plug outside the room for an extension cord. That's the two things they care about. Third would be if it's under $80. So I've stayed at some terrible places. But in talking to Gary, and I'm so sorry that he's not here because Gary has a really cool message. I'm standing in his place today. He has a really cool message of being an angler that left home in his early 20s in 1979, went and fished one Bassmaster event. For the first time he traveled east, he went to Florida. He's from California. Drove to Florida, fished his first event. His second event was at Lake Mead. He won his second event, and that's carried him for 6 decades in the industry. He's one of the leading anglers that's ever lived, founder of Major League Fishing. But Gary and I, from that day at Cabela's, we started talking about his experience, and he refers to it as above the water. He's made everything he's earned in his career has come from above the water, catching fish out of the water. And then he tells people that I work under the water, and I work on the things that are inside the water. And so he's got a really cool message. But we started identifying that him as an angler, me as a biologist, together, we cover a really big perspective, and we can start covering some gaps that there are in conservation efforts. So we founded Black Bass Stewardship Group officially around 2017. And what we do is what's called cause marketing. We take what I know about the science, what he knows about the anglers, and we bring people together to do an activation, experience fisheries management, and we tie in a corporate partner for that. Whenever I travel with Gary, if he's got this wrapped boat and wrapped truck, and he wears a jersey, and people know Gary Klein. We go to a gas station, a boat ramp. He loves to eat Cotton Patch. We go to Cotton Patch, and that boat and truck are sitting there, and people walk up to Gary Klein. And if you ever have the chance to meet him, I would say, here's what his favorite thing is if you walk up to him and say, Gary, I've been a fan of yours since I was a little kid. Or, hey, my dad was a fan of yours, because he loves to feel his age. It's one of his favorite things is whenever people make him feel old. But no, seriously, whenever people walk up, they first say, I'm a huge fan. And then the second question they always ask is, did you catch them today? Which is a question of like, how many fish did you catch, or how good was the fishing? And the follow-up question is, were there any big ones? And I think about that as fisheries professionals. How do people experience our work? On the surface level, that's it. How many fish are they catching? Did they catch any big ones? But it's also a challenge for us. And I see it in my private lake management company too. If a client isn't on the electrofishing boat or didn't see us for our visit, the call we get is, how many fish did you catch? Did you catch a big one? They use those same terms. And the challenge for us is, we think about fisheries management as population management. I've said it, and I know that there are people in this room that have said it, that one individual fish is not relevant. We manage the entire population. But every single day, anglers judge us on how many fish they catch, what was the big fish, and if they're tournament anglers, what was their best 5. So we're using a different system to say, are we successful than our anglers are using. So I'll go take it back to private lake management. If you know your client and you know what they're wanting to buy, you can make a sale, right? Our client are anglers. They want to buy the big fish, their best 5, catch more fish. That's not what we're selling. We're selling a different product than they're buying. So that creates a gap in the conversation. Anglers like Gary understand that. If he was here, he would end his presentation with something like, I've had an amazing career. I've had days on the water that you wouldn't even believe. And my goal is to make sure that the next generation gets to experience those same days. And here's the kicker. I've been doing it for 6 decades. If I was Gary, I've been doing it for 6 decades. And those anglers have to experience it on the same bodies of water I did, because we're not making new ones. And whenever you put that into the perspective, you understand that experience, how they're going to judge us, are on older bodies of water that do take management challenges. Through Black Bass Stewardship Group, early on, we started working with Major League Fishing. That was one of our very first clients. Actually, in 2017, we drove to Tulsa, Gary and I, we sat down with Major League Fishing, and I asked the leadership at that time one question. Major League Fishing does catch, weigh, and immediate release format. That's what they're famous for. I asked them one question. I said, what would you do if every league was doing catch, weigh, and immediate release? What is your conservation effort then? What makes you different then? And there was no answer, because catch, weigh, and release was their conservation efforts, and it's what they were leaning on. So starting in 2017, all the way until 2019, Gary and I did market research for them. We interviewed anglers. We asked them questions about what do they expect from a league. I still do that today. We ended up developing the Fisheries Management Division for Major League Fishing, but I still today we had 80 anglers whenever we started the Bass Pro Tour in 2019. I talk to those anglers. I travel with those anglers. I eat dinner with those anglers. I text with those anglers. I talk to them about, at the highest level, what do professional anglers want us as fishery scientists and the league to do? And every year I do a survey of those anglers. And these are my friends, so the majority of them respond. Some still don't, but majority do. And I ask this question every single year. What do you want MLF, Fisheries Management Division, to focus on? And as I average them out over the last 5 years, here's the response that gets number 1, and you're not going to believe it. They want us to focus on stocking more fish. 94% of the anglers at the top highest level want us to stock more fish. Now, they have a lot of different reasons they want that to happen. And already in this room, we're all going, we don't need to stock more fish. Stocking fish doesn't solve any problem. That's where I go back to, how are anglers experiencing your work? Coming from the private sector, I see this not as a challenge, not as a no, but actually as an opportunity. It's an opportunity to define experience. I'm going to give you a couple examples. Kevin Van Dam. Kevin Van Dam is arguably the number 1 angler that ever existed in bass fishing. Won more money than anybody else. Jacob Wheeler's coming up. He's biting at his heels. But Kevin Van Dam is the guy. Kevin Van Dam has a foundation. Every single year, Kevin sends me a text, or his wife Sherry sends me a text and says, can you find somewhere that I can spend money stocking fish? So we typically do that at our big event, Red Crest. We've had some opportunities with Oklahoma, North Carolina. We find groups where he can spend the money. Kevin has 2 stipulations to this. Stipulation number 1 is that there's some sort of matching fund. What he wants is, if I can give them $10,000, can we turn that into 40 overnight? So he usually tasks the local community with, how do we do that? Second stipulation is, he wants the big check to be presented in front of a crowd. Because Kevin understands the experience of being the person that put the check in the hand that started the matching fund and having an audience of anglers that see him do that. Because his conservation legacy is that check. He doesn't show up when the fish are stocked. He doesn't have a stipulation on how many fish, what size, where they're stocked, what genetics. He doesn't have those stipulations. It's all about the experience. Another program that we've developed is with an angler, Cliff Crochet. Maybe not a famous name, but the first time we were in Tulsa after Red Crest, he was in the back seat of Gary Klein's truck and he just saw Kevin Van Dam give that check away. And he said, I could do that in Louisiana. And I'm not going to do the Cajun accent that he uses. That is what he said. I promise we would need a translator to actually understand it. But he said, I can do that in Louisiana. I can raise more money than Kevin did. I can raise more than $40,000. He said, but my state won't let me stock the fish. And I was in the front seat and I just said, Cliff, what if I can make that happen? Can you really raise more money? So Cliff put on a fundraiser and he had one night gala, 300 people showed up and he raised $85,000 from people in Louisiana. And he lives in the Atchafalaya Basin where they're still like catching crawfish and they're, it's $85,000 is a lot of money. We talked to Louisiana, they gave us the permission. They had very few stipulations, but it started with a conversation of this isn't going to help. The Atchafalaya Basin is going to have hurricanes, it's going to have salinity issues. The average lifespan of those fish is 3 to 4 years. It's not going to help. We have enough reproduction every year. This is not going to help. And we actually got all the biologists on the phone, had a Zoom call, and I said, think about the experience. Let me paint a picture for you. What Cliff wants to do is have a gala, raise $85,000. The next step he wants to do is he wants to bring the community to a city park, have the fish truck pull up, have kids and anglers line up, have those fish be put into a bag, and then walk them down to the shoreline. So the actual win is not the fish going in the water. The actual win is that community financially engaging in that process, and then the kids and the anglers experiencing those fish go into the water. Because what that does is it creates an opportunity. 3 years later, they're still doing this program. Is it changing the fish population? Probably not. Is it hurting the fish population? Definitely not. Fisheries Management Division, I also use an old school sales technique, which is called the bait and switch. The bait and switch says, you want to do fish stocking. Great. But did you know there's a lot of data that we need to collect before we can do fish stocking to see if it is something that would actually improve our fisheries? What if we anglers could collect weights of fish? We do that with the score tracker. In my bio, it says something like 119,000 fish that we've got weights on across the country. The number is now like 133,000 because we just had another event and added 3 more thousand fish. But our anglers buy into the fact that they can collect data and provide it to the agency, and they think they're doing their part, but also they will take it a step further. We asked them about, what would you do if we had a program where you could collect DNA? What would you be willing to do? And they said, well, we would like to do that, but we don't want to cut anything off of a fish. We don't want to do a fin clip. Because I explained the process. They said, we don't want to do that on live TV. But they will do a buccal swab. So there's an opportunity there to engage the anglers. Which brings me kind of to my last point, is whenever you're doing these things, you have to find your champions. You have to find the anglers that are willing to engage and learn the science so that you can bridge that gap and create the experience. Finding your champions is pretty easy. You start with the people closest to you, right? My wife, Casey, my staff, those are our champions. Those are people that believe in us more than we believe in ourselves. Those are people that will talk about how great we're doing, but they don't really build an audience necessarily, but they give you the support that you need. For me personally, finding my champions comes down to 2 things: social media and the new media, podcasts like Bailey's Serious Angler, and now Bailey and I partner to do Real Biology, where we interview scientists just like yourself about your daily work. People like Ken Duke. Ken Duke is the ultimate hype man in bass fishing. He has this encyclopedia of everything that's ever happened. You'll get the experience of hearing about the history of bass fishing from him during this meeting. But Ken also opens that platform. And he knows everybody in the fishing industry. So if you do one thing this week, get Ken Duke's phone number so that whenever you want to know an angler or you want to know a tackle company, Ken can just make that connection for you. And if you're willing to go to the ASA Sportfish Summit, he will walk you around and introduce you to every single person. He did it for me. He's a valuable resource. Glad you're here, Ken. The last one is the anglers. The anglers that have the audience. I mean, a lot of us would probably say that the everyday fisherman doesn't really trust fisheries managers anymore. There's been a disconnect in communication and in resource management and their perception, their experience with us. But they do trust these professionals. And a professional isn't just defined by the top 80 people that are fishing in tournaments. It's professionals like Bailey who are out in kayaks, who have podcasts. Those are professionals in the fishing industry that anglers generally trust. So you have to find the anglers that really have the fisheries management background or are willing to be taught the fisheries management background that will be your champions. A key to that is often involving their sponsors. Gary told me early on, let's say 2017, when we were putting Black Bass Stewardship together, he told me anglers inherently are selfish. They're not going to want to do anything unless they're being paid for it, unless it benefits them. And over time, I've learned that that's fairly true. So one of the ways that we engage anglers and get them excited about a program is we simply involve their sponsor. If Toyota is going to sponsor something, Kubota is going to sponsor something, and the angler can show up and represent their sponsor, then they can invoice that sponsor for their time. That helps. So my challenge for you right now, in your notes, somewhere in your phone, list 10 anglers. List 10 new media, YouTubers, podcasters that you want to engage with on your projects. And then we can work on how do we actually get them to become your champion. It will be a challenge for you, besides Ken Duke and Bailey and like a few of us. It'll be a challenge for you to even list 10 professional anglers. It really is. But whenever you make that list, you find your champions, and then you just have to engage with them. But you have to do it from their perspective, understanding how they experience your work. Goes back to sales. You have to know who your client is. You have to know what they want to buy. And that's exactly what I'm saying with Find Your Champions. And to prove that, Gary would hit me over the head if I did not tell you the Black Bass Stewardship Group wants to be one of your champions. Gary has worked over the last 3 years getting companies that sponsor him to offer discounts for fisheries professionals. If you want discounts on any kind of rods, reels, tackle, Gary's building this program specifically with Black Bass for us. If you go to that QR code, give your email address, there's no stipulation. He's going to give you all the promo codes for those companies, and he's going to keep building on this. And he wants this to be one of those gateways to being your champion. David, we do questions now? Okay.
Yeah.
Let's do it. I'll put this back up so it'll look good. Any questions?
Yeah. Use a microphone or my air-built voice carrying across the room. Thanks for the talk. It's really cool. Share that perspective. I'd like to hear you also talk about your experience engaging in sort of the other really important elements of the management. You talk a lot about the sort of the population elements, but there's also, of course, the ecosystem itself, the nutrient inputs, the habitat quality and quantity of the food web that sustains the growth of these fish. Do you have some there's a lot of groups out there, like tons of reservoirs engaged in these kinds of things. I'd be curious to hear about your perspective, trying to work in the stakeholders into those kinds of perspectives of the management as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. So this question is, how do we engage in ecosystem management? And I'll use Fisheries Management Division once again, MLF. That's the second thing that always pops up, the second highest one. It's like 87% is habitat management specifically. And so, well, Gary and I, when we put together the Fisheries Management Division, we did so with 4 pillars. Fish care is number 1. Number 2, fisheries enhancement. Number 3 is research. Number 4 is education. And probably the work that I'm most known for is the habitat work. It's artificial habitat primarily, because I did, once again, interview the anglers. What do we need out of habitat? How are we going to engage the audience? If you come to Nexus, you're going to see that. At Nexus, we're going to go over what we do for habitat management and how we put it together. But I've done projects in 7 states, multiple projects, over 25 projects. We have partners with Minn Kota and Kubota, and they fully fund the project. We involve youth anglers, so usually what we do is we find the local angler that is from that state, and we ask them to invite the high school clubs. And then we partner with the state agency. So we use their permit, their equipment for the barges. We use mossback artificial habitat. We worked with mossback to do a microplastic recapture during their manufacturing process. We have safety and data sheets for all their plastic that they provide to me and I can provide to the state, or you can get directly from them. It talks about what's actually in their plastic. And we ship that product in, and we bring anglers from Major League Fishing. We bring our officials, we bring Kubota, and we bring the high school anglers and the state agency together for one day. We do it assembly line style, build everything, put it out, and then I tell a narrative story that is told on the live stream for our anglers and in print on the Major League Fishing website that talks about what is the purpose of this habitat. The purpose of this habitat is to increase recruitment, redefine sampling, or often I build habitat projects around the idea that bass are brought to one specific boat ramp for weigh-ins repetitively, and therefore within a general mile, half mile of that boat ramp, we need more habitat so they have the ability to recover. And so we call it the bass recovery zone. So we do develop a lot of work on that. Just wasn't something I put in this, but yeah, that's about 25% of our work is on that.
I have a question.
Yes, sir, Dave.
I'm always amazed at how many anglers think that the fish that they catch were all raised in hatcheries and stocked, even in lakes that have never been stocked. We do a lot of our work up in Ontario, and they don't stock these lakes. And one angler asked me, well, how did they ever get fish? How did these fish ever get here? I went, they swam 10,000 years ago when the glaciers would see that they came in. They live here, and they go, no, it just can't be, and
yeah.
It's how do we get that message that actually bass can reproduce?
Well, that's a great one, Dave. They can reproduce. We also create a conflict of our own, because we often talk about how stocking fish doesn't work, it doesn't change a population, but then in that same conversation, we'll talk about bucket biology and don't move certain species of bass because their introduction into the system will cause issues. So those species being stocked does work, but the species that you raise in hatcheries don't work. And whenever I've had anglers ask me this, like, why is it that if I had 10 Alabama bass and put them in, that will destroy the system, but if you put in 10,000 fingerlings, it's not going to work?
Did you put 10,000 Alabama bass fingerlings in?
No, but 10,000 bass fingerlings in general.
Right, yeah.
Why wouldn't that work? And that's an education gap, and you've said it. This meeting happened 50 years ago, 25 years ago, and yet today we have 2 or 3 media people here. We have like 4 private sector people here, and we're going to have 1 or 2 anglers here. We're not doing a good job communicating the simple science. And that goes back to, they ask us for something like fish stocking. And instead of embracing them and saying, let's involve you in the process, let's put you on an electrofishing boat, let's talk about the science. Because if Jacob Wheeler did 1 video on electrofishing in Tennessee, it will reach 3 to 5 million people. We can't produce that content. And all it takes is one of us saying, Jacob, will you come on the boat? And we have room for your media guy to film this. They need the content. If they created that content, it would move the mountains for us.
Yeah. That's our goal this week.
It's goal.
Great,
Thank you.
thanks.